Hi, welcome to this little workshop looking at the pelvic floor and Mula Bandha. So maybe you've heard of Mula Bandha before, maybe it means nothing to you, maybe you've been in class and they've said, engage your Mula Bandha, and you thought, what on earth is that? So hopefully this workshop will help to clear that up a little bit and provide some helpful information to help you in your practice. So most of us have heard of the pelvic floor. It's one of these things that we kind of talk about and then everything gets a bit hush-hush and it can get a bit embarrassing. So this is the perfect opportunity to learn about it, to explore for yourself at home, because it's a recorded session and nobody's watching. So ideal. So when we think about the word Mula Bandha, or the words Mula Bandha, so Mula means root. So it's working with the root of the body, which makes sense because it's all about the muscles in the pelvis, internally and externally. So there's a lot going on in that part of the body. There's a lot going on in the pelvic floor. So I suppose a simple way of talking about engaging Mula Bandha would be talking about engaging the pelvic floor. And there are probably a million different ways that you've been told that you can do that. Sometimes it can be, about really intense squeezing and holding, and this workshop's really to provide a different take on that, to inform you a little bit about what's going on in your body, what the pelvic floor is, what Mula Bandha is, how to work with it in yoga, how to use it in yoga, and for your own personal life as well. So when we're thinking about the pelvic floor and Mula Bandha, these are things that are almost definitely being used if you've ever seen people in crazy arm balances or yoga poses that look impossible. They provide support for the core of the body, and stability. So if you're working in any kind of balance, even if you're working, lifting one foot off the ground or in tree or something like that, then knowing how to activate your pelvic floor and Mula Bandha effectively will really, really help you. So let's have a little look at what the pelvic floor even is and where it is and what muscles and all of that kind of stuff. So coming up into a kneeling position. So the pelvic floor, if you kind of imagine it, it's in a diamond shape. So there are 4 points of attachment, let's say, for this diamond. It is more complicated than that, but let's kind of bring your attention to 4 points. Simplify it a little bit because that makes it easier to be able to visualize, at least from my point of view. So the front point is the pubic bone. So to find your pubic bone is the lowest bone and it's at the front of the body. So it's going to be around here. So if you're at home and you're able to and you're by yourself, then have a little feel around, find your pubic bone. And then with your other hand, you're going to go and touch the coccyx. So if you've ever hurt your coccyx, oh my God, how painful, then you'll know exactly where that is. Otherwise, it's the kind of lowest bone at the back. So the spine comes down and it goes into the sacrum and then ends at the coccyx. It's kind of a little bone that bends around like that. So very, very bottom of your spine, kind of almost in between the butt cheeks. Okay, so that's your pubic bone and that's your coccyx. So those are your 2 points on your diamond. The other 2 points are your sit bones. They can be a little harder to find sometimes. They get a bit hidden in there. But if you were to lean back, as if you were going to sit on your heels, bring your hands behind your body, you can kind of maybe just about find 2 little bones that are your sit bones if you lower down. So have a little explore there. Find the 4 points, or at least be able to visualize where they are. So pubic bone, coccyx, 2 sit bones. Everything that's in between those 4 points is in what's called the pelvic bowl. So everything that's around there are layers of muscle, and internally as well, you've got muscles that form part of the pelvic floor and the pelvic bowl. So it's everything in that area. So when we think about activating the pelvic floor, it's not just about activating one end. So often when people describe how to activate the pelvic floor, they'll be like, oh, imagine that you're doing a wee and then you need to stop, or imagine if you're going to fart and then hold it in. If we're just doing one of those things, we're not activating the whole of the pelvic floor. We're kind of getting the front or the back, or maybe we're doing a little bit in the middle. But actually, hopefully what I can offer you today is a way to to activate everything together, which is what you want, right? So a way in which I was taught about the pelvic floor, which I found incredibly useful, it works really, really well for me, is rather than this sense of squeezing and holding, you know, getting more of a sense of gathering, and it's an inward and an upward gathering from those 4 points. So if you imagine that underneath those 4 points, you've got a little piece of tissue paper, super delicate, and you want to keep it not from getting, you don't want it to be crumpled, you want it to stay nice and flat. So from those 4 points, you're going to work to flatten out the piece of tissue paper, keeping it flat, and then seeing if you can very, very gently from those 4 points, lift it and gather it in and up. So it's quite a subtle movement. It's not this kind of really intense, aggressive squeezing, but it is working with all of those 4 points. So it can take a little bit of practice. So having a think about all of those 4 points individually, imagining your piece of tissue paper under there, and then getting a sense of spreading the tissue paper out and then gathering in and up from all of those 4 points. And as you gather in and up, it's not just an engagement in that part of the body. You'll notice internally that there's a feeling of inward and upward movement as well. So that is how to engage the pelvic floor fully. When we talk about engaging Mula Bandha, that's kind of what we're talking about, is engaging from all of those 4 points, gathering in and up, and internally getting that feeling of gathering in and up as well. So often at the beginning of class, I'll cue about breathing into the belly, and you can try that right now as you breathe in, feeling the belly and breathing out. So when we're thinking about engaging the pelvic floor, on your next inhale, seeing if you can get that gathering in and up, that holding of that piece of tissue paper, not scrunching it, just lifting it up. And then keeping it there as you're exhaling. And on your next inhale, seeing if you can bring the breath to the lower ribs. So breathing into the side, the back of the lower ribs. So expanding this way. So kind of like a diaphragmatic lateral breath. So not coming up into the top of the chest, but keeping that engagement in the pelvic floor. And having a little practice, it might take a couple of attempts, but it's just kind of feeling into your body, you know, what's going on as you're kind of getting that feeling of gathering in and up. Can you bring the breath into this lateral breath? So when you're doing something like a balance, that's really what's going on, is that gathering in and up from the pelvic bowl and then moving the breath into a lateral breath so that you're able to still breathe really deeply, very important in yoga, but also get that hold in, that support from the root and that stability. So that's why bandhas, they're called locks, because it's almost holding that gathering in while you're doing everything else, and that's where you're getting the benefit from. So maybe once you've had a little practice, as long as you want with that, coming to stand and then trying the same thing here. So being aware of those 4 points, spreading that little piece of tissue paper out, and then drawing in and up from those 4 points, gathering in and up, noticing the internal engagement, keeping the piece of tissue paper nice and flat, so no scrunching. Bringing the breath into the lateral breath, so into the side of the ribs, the back of the ribs. And then once you've got that, grounding down into maybe one foot and keeping that engagement, maybe lifting one leg. So noticing the stability that comes with grounding down through the foot and having that internal engagement in the body. Not to say there won't be any wobbling, but just notice the sensations that are going on, the confidence that comes up from the ground as you're able to engage this part of the body in a different way. Maybe giving it a go on the other side. So if you're on a really thick, squishy carpet, you might find just a wobbling a little bit. So you're not necessarily doing anything wrong if you're having a wobble. Don't worry about it. It's just about observing what's going on in your body and noticing what's happening. So again, getting a sense for those 4 corners, gathering in, gathering upwards, bringing the breath into the ribs, and then maybe lifting the leg. And then getting a sense as you ground down through that foot, the stability that comes with this breath, and bringing the foot down whenever you want, so having a little play. So this can be used in any kind of balance when you're on one leg, or even an arm balance. So if you're practicing crow pose, it's really, really good for that. Or if you're doing any other arm balances, it's a great way to bring that stability, that support into that part of the body. And you'll notice once that is engaged that actually things really start to shift in your practice. Another place that I find it really, really helpful is if you are floating forwards in your vinyasas. So if that's something that you like to do, is to float forward, then while you're in your downward facing dog, seeing if you can engaging Mula Bandha, so engaging the pelvic floor, coming up onto the toes, and when it's engaged, then taking your float forward to the top of the mat. And you'll notice that you can come forward much more quietly and gentle when you've got that engaged, to when you're just kind of trying to bring it forward with all of your strength and energy. So it can make poses feel a lot lighter, feel a lot easier. So hopefully that's felt informative, and do feel free to write any questions if you've got any. So yeah, hope you've enjoyed that little workshop on Mula Bandha and the pelvic floor, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.